Welcome back to another episode of On the Air, a podcast brought to you by Stonewater. On the Air brings together key industry figures, colleagues and customers to explore the latest insight and stories. Our host, Paula Palmer, will be joined each episode by a guest co-host, as well as other special guests, bringing their expertise and experience to our conversations about what matters most in social housing.
Hello and welcome back to Stonewater's On the Air podcast. This is our first of our end of season double bill talking about investment. Today we're going to be talking about what it really means to invest in our homes and communities. Stonewater is investing £90 million this year to ensure our homes are warm, safe and affordable. But what does that really look like? From new kitchens, heating systems, sustainability and smart tech, we're going to be exploring how this investment is making a difference and measuring that impact through the voices of our residents. So I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Harris, who's our Chief Executive here at Stonewater, Catherine Evans, our Director of Homes Operations, and Mark Astbury, who is a partner at Ridge, a built environment consultancy. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Catherine, please do introduce yourself. Tell us a bit more about how Stonewater ensures that £90 million investment delivers maximum value across such a large and diverse portfolio, please.
Thanks so much, Paula. So yes, I'm Catherine Evans, Director of Homes Operations for Stonewater. I have the luxury of working alongside two fantastic colleagues, our Director of Compliance, Sarah Stevenson-Jones, and Robert Pano, our Director of Asset Strategy. So across our three portfolios and all of the wonderful colleagues that we have around our teams, we're responsible for ensuring that all of our Stonewater homes remain safe, secure, warm and affordable for our customers. You've mentioned our £90 million budget, there or thereabouts. Sounds massive, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm,
It's,
yeah.
you know, that's a big number. But when you contextualise that in the fact that we are responsible for 40,000 homes, near enough 90,000 customers, that's whilst large numbers, we have a significant responsibility to make sure that money is used wisely to ensure that all of our customers' homes remain in a condition that we need to maintain from a legislative and regulatory perspective, but also produce communities and environments that our customers want to be within. So from my perspective, my job is to oversee delivery and leadership of operational delivery across our asset management services. And I work very closely with Rob, who I've just mentioned, who leads on the asset strategy delivery. So assets strategy derive the strategy for delivery and my ops teams deliver those. Mm-hmm. So 90 million, it's a big number, but the reality is when you start to deliver that over the course of all of the services that we're responsible for, from decent homes through to compliance, ensuring that gas safety, asbestos safety, etc., and just day-to-day repairs are delivered, is quite a significant activity for Stonewater. So we work very closely together, and the most important thing is that we need to ensure that we've got healthy and sustainable relationships with all of our contractors. So Stonewater can't deliver these services in isolation. We work with a number of external contractors, as well as our more our newer the introduction of a small scale direct labour workforce, to ensure that everything that we must deliver, we do.
Lovely, thanks Catherine. No, we were joking earlier, weren't we, about how 90 million in your own pocket, it gets you a lot of fast cars and nice handbags, but it's spread a bit more thinly over 40,000 homes.
Well, I always come back to the fact, and people will be bored of hearing me say this, but I think a big number sounds big. If it was in your bank account,
yes,
you would be far more pedantic
thrilled
about the way it's spent. So I'm the one with the miser's purse as it stands at the moment.
Fabulous. Nick, welcome to On the Air. Can you add to what Catherine's mentioned, perhaps talking about how it's aligned with long-term value and our customers' priorities?
First of all, I might like a fast car, but I think I'd want a handbag.
Fair enough.
So I've got slightly different priorities. So it does sound like a huge sum of money, and of course it is a huge sum of money. And Catherine is very right in to say that spending it wisely is really important. And the way we work to make sure we spend it wisely, first of all, we try and listen to customers. We try and listen to what customers, what they want, what their expectation, but also, more importantly, what their aspiration is. So we listen to customers and try and shape the programme around what people want, what their aspiration is for their home and for their future. You overlay, though, as Catherine said a moment ago, the regulatory and legislative requirements. That actually takes a big chunk of money already just to keep within the law. So huge sums of money is spent to make sure everything is within legislation or health and safety. So we speak to our customers, we get their feedback, and then we go and look to see how can we make that work. But as the owners of the property and the long-term stewards of people's homes, it's important for us that we look at the overall portfolio that we have. So one of the things that we've been looking at in recent years, as you'll probably know, we've been successful in getting quite a lot of decarbonisation money from the government. Thinking about customer feedback, we've had feedback over the years from customers that they don't like Economy 7 heating, or what I would call the old night storage heaters. So we have prioritised where we can the replacement of those very inefficient and expensive night storage heaters to more efficient, far more effective air source heat pumps, or in occasions ground source heat pumps. So that's a good example of where we've listened to what customers have said and prioritised that expenditure. So we've got a duty and a responsibility as long-term stewards to make sure that we invest wisely and give our homes that extra length of longevity, so that in the next 10, 20, 30 years, when they become available for rent, that they're still popular, that they still meet people's expectations and aspirations. So £90 million is a huge sum of money, but as Catherine's already said, it doesn't actually go very far when you look at those things that we're grappling with.
Thanks, Nick. That's a great answer. Mark, let's have you tell us some more about you, about Ridge, and how your consultancy perhaps supports landlords like Stonewater to make good investment decisions.
Thank you, Paula. And first of all, thank you very much to Stonewater for inviting me to join today's session. It's really useful to hear firsthand what providers like Stonewater are doing, and also do some comparison with other clients that we work with. In terms of me, I'm a chartered building surveyor by background, also a chartered member of CIH, Chartered Institute of Housing. Why did I do that? Because I wanted to know more about affordable housing needs and drivers than just the bricks and sticks of properties and homes. And I think that's quite an important thing to focus on in terms of this discussion. It's much more, as Nick and Catherine have already said, it's more than just the homes and what's underneath the roof. So that's really sort of important. As far as Ridge is concerned, I've been at Ridge for 22 years. I head up the affordable housing specialist team. Ridge itself is a built environment consultant. So again, we've moved away from just being property construction, looking more widely at the built environment and basically helping our clients to create places that are great places to sort of work, live and learn. So that's what we're about. We're a multidisciplinary practice, which means we provide a number of services across that sector. And in terms of how we support landlords like Stonewater with their investment decisions, I think we've already touched on the challenges within the sector in terms of all the different things that we're looking at doing. Things like condensation, damp and mould, AWAB's law that comes in October, fire, safety, compliance, reinvestment, etc. There's an awful lot of challenges to meet. And I think our support obviously comes in terms of the priority of those around health and safety, landlords' obligations, etc., before we start even looking at things like component renewals. So I think it's really important that we understand basically what assets or homes need in terms of investment. And that comes from a foundation of good quality and up-to-date stock condition survey data. That sounds quite dry, quite boring, but that is the principal foundation. If we don't know what the properties need, and indeed what residents' drivers and needs are, how can we programme properly and prioritise investment? So yes, 90 million is a lot, but if you do the simple maths and divide that by 40,000, that gives you roughly how much per annum. So it doesn't come to a great deal. So we've got to spend it really carefully. I think historically, certainly when the Decent Home Standard first came in, going back nearly 20 years now, there was a bit of let's just renew lots of components, and we didn't really think about the holistic approach to it and whether it actually made sense and was that actually improving the residents' homes. And there was also a number of different ways of achieving decency as a minimum standard, which we'll talk about later. So I think that focus, which has come into obviously sharper focus now with consumer standards off the back of the Social Housing Regulations Act, which came into force in April of last year. So there's a number of drivers around the consumer standards in terms of safety, data, tenant engagement, home standard, etc. So our role is really to help guide through all those different sort of parameters and to see how investment is focused to achieve all those different competing requirements asset managers have to juggle and deliver for customers.
That sounds like quite an important role added to the mix of what we've already spoken about. And data keeps coming up time after time in this podcast on how important it is to have good, accurate data. Catherine, how do you strike the balance between listening to customers, the data, making investment decisions that are necessary for our sustainable homes that are safe, warm and in a good state of repair?
It's a very good question, and one that we not struggle with, but we work with on a daily basis. So to come back to Mark's point, which is completely right around decency, compliance, etc., it's wonderful to be part of an organisation where actually our decency and our compliance levels are there or thereabouts in terms of always achieving kind of above 99%. So that's a wonderful thing for our teams and obviously for our customers as well to ensure they're safe. Within Stonewater, we have our customer promise, which we're completely committed to. So we're proud to make things personal. If it matters to our customers, it matters to us. So that is the internal mantra that we ask all of our colleagues to consider when they're making decisions. And obviously, every customer ask or request is always considered through that lens. However, the reality is, as we've just discussed in terms of budgetary restraints and the ability to manage expectations and delivery from a legislative and regulatory perspective, sometimes, unfortunately, the answer's no. And that's a reality of life in the same way as, I'd love to buy my daughter's 16 chocolate bars a day, but the answer's no, because it's firstly, I can't afford it, and secondly, it's not good for them. So it's about making those kind of educated decisions that are based on our budgetary restraints and what we must deliver to our customers and what we can do if the budgetary envelope allows that. So a big part of the work that our teams do, and that's not just from a homes perspective, that's across the organisation, development, customer experience colleagues, right through to our corporate colleagues that support us as enablers. There has to be, unfortunately, times where we do say no. The important thing is that throughout that decision-making process, we're completely engaged with our customers. Yeah. So we work very closely with our scrutiny panel, with customer representatives on our challenge and assurance panels, on our board, and those that are committed to supporting their time through our customer hub and other channels to ensure that we're making the right decisions that are based on the data that you referenced, Paula, customer insight information that we have, to make sure that we're making informed decisions that not only align the wants and needs and aspirations of our customers alongside everything that as an organisation we're obliged to deliver. Mm-hmm. And we continue to work with our customers on that, and it's never nice to say no. never nice, but sometimes, unfortunately, we have to. But we just need to be transparent around why that is the answer, and to provide oversight and visibility of the fact we've heard you, we've listened to you. This is the plan moving forward, but that we need to be realistic about what's achievable at any given period. That does create, unfortunately, sometimes a tension between the tenant satisfaction measures, which are largely perception based, and the transactional data of, how did a single repair, for example, was received by a customer at that point in time. But we work very, very closely with our data colleagues, our IT colleagues, our contractors, who obviously are predominantly delivering some of these services for us, and our customers overarchingly, to make sure that any bit of insight we receive is actively utilised to inform the direction of travel of our services moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. That's a great answer. Nick, customer perception doesn't always actually reflect actual performance, does it? So how is Stonewater using customer experiences, like your recent visit to Kennedy Drive, to better understand and respond to customer concerns?
Thank you, Paula. We get a raft of information and data at Stonewater. So some of it is data that we collect ourselves. So repair requests and people's demography and vulnerabilities, etc. And we have to use that and utilise that as best we can. But we also get complaints and compliments, and we also get feedback from other stakeholders. So recently, Catherine and I actually spent the afternoon, Friday afternoon, up in Swindon with the local MP and a group of residents. And when the meeting started, there was a lot of dissatisfaction. And I was thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be a challenging afternoon. But a lot of the dissatisfaction wasn't with Stonewater. It was a whole combination of things. It's with the dustbin collection for the local council. It's actually the litter picking from the local council, but also antisocial behaviour and criminal behaviour that the police are working with. So as the afternoon progressed and we picked through these issues, it became a lot clearer on what the real challenges were. And purely from a Stonewater point of view, Catherine's talked about a moment ago about personal choice. And when you're doing capital works or component replacement works to people's homes, so their kitchens or bathrooms or windows, people can say yes or no. And that's quite easy, so people can own that. But on a scheme like Kennedy Drive, where there's a lot of homes, there's a lot of communal repairs and a lot of communal services, which people have very different views on. People will say, I want this, and another person say, I don't actually want that. And it becomes really interesting in that situation where people then hear a challenge from their neighbours about why they don't want something. And it's actually very helpful actually in those situations, because then people can hear the counter arguments to why we might not want to do something. So going out meeting residents like that is really helpful, because it gives the opportunity to hear opinions, but also to hear conflicting opinions, and then trying to navigate what is a reasonable solution. So as in a really small example, as a result of Kennedy Drive, people were saying we want some door entries on their flats, and Catherine agreed to go away and get some prices. And those of you that work in social housing will know that door entries is an improvement which needs to be paid for by people through their service charges. And one of these blocks of flats, I saw in the letter that went back to the residents recently, is £20,000. And we could do it. But do people want to pay their share of £20,000 on their service charge? And that really does focus people's minds, because all the time they think they need to do this. It's easy. When we go back and say, we can do this and this is the cost, we quite often have a different response. And it's really important to be open and transparent and say to people, yes, we can do that, but this is the cost. And then people would then take a view on whether they actually want to meet that cost. So that's quite actually a salutary experience for residents and for us. But it actually helps give people ownership of the solutions. And some of the solutions, like with door entries, I did say to people, door entries isn't the silver bullet, because they break down, people don't use them, people jam the doors open, etc., etc. So maybe there's a more simple solution to your problem of actually a bit more neighbourhood community spirit about challenging people that are in the hallways that shouldn't be there, etc. So it's really important for us to actually listen to feedback, interrogate that feedback, and then take a view, what is the right answer for that community. If it's people's homes, it's easier, because other than statutory reasons why we have to do something, if somebody doesn't want to have a new kitchen or a new bathroom, then we generally would say, okay, we'll come back later when perhaps the house is vacant. That is not a good way for us to deliver our programme, because it's more expensive to go back, but we are very flexible and we do go back. But it's the communal repairs, communal services, which is more of a challenge. And interestingly, my conclusion at the end of that day was this was more about communal services than individual services. And I have to say, having walked around the estate, it looked very good. Now, I go out probably once a week, once every 2 weeks, and I don't tell people where I'm going. I just drive and walk around. I'm always amazed how open people are to tell you. They don't even ask who I am sometimes. I always have my card, but they would give you feedback about their repair service, the grounds maintenance, their building cleaning, etc. And I have to say that 95% of the time I go out and I'm pretty impressed with how things are looking. And when things aren't well, I come back and I phone up people and say, we need to go out and have a look at this because it's not working right.
I love the thought of you being our mystery shopper, Nick. That's a great visual.
It's all of our jobs. If we know there's some Stonewater homes, to drive by and have a look. And over the years, my children would say to me when they were young, why are we here, Dad? I was like, I'm just having a look at something.
Yeah, I used to, where I drive around and go, oh, that's a Stonewater home. That's a Stonewater home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great. Mark, so how is data and technology changing the way you and your clients gather data and use it?
As I mentioned earlier, I joined Ridge 22 years ago. Back in those days, stock surveys, collection of data, etc., was a pen, a clipboard, and some survey forms, and we would then manually input that data, double entry, etc. So the changes have been phenomenal over the years. Obviously, we're using a lot more in the ways of things like tablets, iPads, etc., which obviously is not new, but progress. So we've moved away from the pens and paper and the individual cameras, etc. But certainly, I've noticed over probably the last 2 or 3 years, maybe a bit longer than that, the technology that's being utilised now is quite remarkable. Most recently, in terms of Ridge, we've now started using automated drone technology. So not just sort of single building inspections with a pilot stood at the bottom flying a drone up and down a building or across a number of buildings. But these drones are on sort of pre-planned flights and will do image capturing. It's a bit like, if I can say it, it's a bit like Google on steroids in terms of the quality of what it can do now. The ability to create three-dimensional models of properties, digital twins, by which we can save information back to systems like GIS. The technology is quite groundbreaking, and that technology can also be used for things like thermal imaging, so thermographic imaging, seeing where heat loss is going from properties, seeing how solar panels are performing, identifying defects, so can pick up from thermographics and other clever tech, if there's roof leaks or there's cracks in buildings, etc. So the technology is quite impressive. It can also be used to monitor, the building of new homes or alterations, etc. And that, in combination with other things such as artificial intelligence, obviously artificial intelligence, a great deal of noise around that. It's not the be all and end all and the answer, but it is a massively powerful tool in terms of what we do in terms of data analysis. You're never going to remove, in my view, the human touch and the translation and understanding of data, but it's there because in terms of housing, obviously, one of our biggest challenges is just the volume. You take 40,000 homes that Stonewater own, you look at all the social housing, affordable housing across the country, it's millions. So having good data and capturing that through these sorts of automated technology is quite key. As well as that, there's also the ability, and next time Nick goes out, we should give him some tech to go and do a couple of surveys while he's doing his walk around. But also the ability to internally survey, not necessarily by a surveyor. So there's a variety of apps, camcorders, etc., which can record information internally within a property. So that might be obviously one of our challenges as stock condition surveyors is getting access to properties. We have various issues around vulnerable residents, people obviously who are at work during the day, school runs, etc., etc. So just providing that extra element of flexibility in terms of both, sort of making appointments through apps and what have you, or using technology for that, but also in some cases using technology to actually capture images within a property that we can then review and interpret to create the investment requirements. So that could be the gas engineer doing the annual gas check, it could be the electrical engineer, it could be someone from housing management, it could be someone doing a sort of damp and mold inspection, etc. So trying to make sure that when touch points happen, when people go into residents' homes, obviously we don't want to be going in sort of 6, 7, 8 times a year or what have you. So if we can use the technology to minimise that sort of thing, that would be great. So almost, self-serving type ability to survey. In addition, there's obviously a lot of technology around things like security, energy usage, predictive maintenance requirements, etc. So there's a great deal of tech, and I know Stonewater obviously invested in some of that as well, in terms of using that to get feedback from the property, but also how the residents using it, or if there are any issues around particularly elderly, vulnerable residents. If there's the motion detectors, people aren't sort of moving around, does that start flagging alarms and people checking in that people are okay? So that sort of tech has moved on phenomenally in the time that I've been sort of working in the sector. It's also helping us with some of our challenges around resourcing. So the property and construction industry historically tends to go through cycles in terms of when people want to come into it. They see the construction industry in a recession, it doesn't really appeal to people to come in. And it's also, I think, encouraging people to come into the housing sector as well as an exciting career. Confess, I didn't come into housing, as a direct route, and that's what I wanted to do. But I think the shortages with surveyors, we can help plug with some of the tech, but also the tech also provides the youngsters with something that's actually a bit more interesting to them and what they like to use as part of their working life. So there's real opportunities there, and just giving that degree of self-service if residents want to do that because of their own circumstances. So probably very high level, but yes, tech-wise, substantial changes and lots of more exciting stuff to come, I think.
That's brilliant. Those levels of technology are just astounding, aren't they? They're really fascinating. So, as you sort of implied there, Stonewater has started using some of this smart technology, and I'm going to ask Nick to tell us a bit more about where we are on our journey and the impact it's having, please.
Well, thank you, Paula. And that was really interesting, Mark, to hear your viewpoint. I sort of feel that the technology road is... we're on the outside lane of the motorway. The speed of change is going very fast. And one of the challenges that we have at Stonewater is a sector-wide challenge, is that our repair service is still pretty much a reactive service. So people phone up and then we react. The real prize for us will be to make it a proactive service, where we go out and do a repair before it goes wrong. Can you imagine the impact that would have on satisfaction if we were able to go out and say, we need to do this repair because we think this is going to happen? So how are we working to at Stonewater to move towards getting a proactive service. So for us, the Internet of Things started in 2023. We were part of the Switchy programme, putting little sensors in people's homes. And we were part of the Oxford City Network over in Oxford, where we had a number of homes having a ground source heat pump put in. And it was actually using intelligent information to source their electricity in the most efficient and cost-efficient way possible. So that was our toe in the water, so to speak. And we've not rested on our laurels since then, because we've got this desire to move increasingly fast towards embracing technology. Our end goal is to be delivering a proactive service, not a reactive service. So what have we been doing to achieve that? Well, we've been working very closely and putting sensors into people's homes. We've done 1,000 last year. That will tell us about levels of condensation or moisture. That will tell us about the levels of damp in the people's homes. It will tell us also, are they drying their clothes on the radiators? Have they got the windows closed? Is the house, dangerously damp? Do they need to actually either turn the heating up, open the windows, etc.? All of that work, all that information is coming back to us. How we interrogate that and use that is going to be really important moving forward, because to be proactive, we then need to be able to contact people through their preferred method. So WhatsApp, texts, emails, telephone calls, knock on the door if need be, and say, we believe that we've got this problem in your home. Can we work together to resolve that so you don't have a damp home, or you don't have a breakdown in your boiler or whatever? So we're doing that investment now. We're setting up the infrastructure to deal with that. But let's just think also about our new homes. So we've got a strategy of making sure our new homes are warm, safe, affordable, but also efficient and sustainable. So we've had some projects recently with a Wonderwall project where actually we're using modern technology to set the heating around the homes, to use battery technology so that people are minimising the cost of them to heat their homes. This is new technology, and people like me would probably struggle with it. Our younger members of the community go like ducks to water, but that is the future, that is the aspiration. So actually using that technology to provide a proactive repair service is the silver bullet for us moving forward.
So, Catherine, what role does your team play in implementing these technologies that Nick's been talking about, and what are the biggest challenges you're facing on the ground?
Well, as Nick's just outlined, we've done a large degree of work in terms of piloting some of this technology and influencing our wider strategic commitments to the Internet of Things, smart homes, development activities, and we obviously work very closely with our IT and data colleagues in terms of progressing those concepts. And as Nick has said, the significant improvement and shift from both a strategic and a customer focused perspective is moving away from reactive maintenance to predictive maintenance. That's where we improve customer outputs. It's an easier, more customer focused service, and also from a commercial perspective, far more financially beneficial for us as an organisation to ensure that we can then invest back into our homes and our developments at a larger pace. I think the challenges that we are working very closely with our contracting partners on is the skills gap within the wider sector. So with new technology comes a new skill set requirement, and it's incumbent on us, if we are implementing this new technology and these new devices, whether it's air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps through to switchy technology that Nick has just outlined, we need to make sure that we have got a supply chain there, whether it's internally delivered or externally delivered, where we can maintain and continue to maintain this new technology over the life cycle of that within our homes. So we work very, very closely with our key contractors to ensure that that supply chain is developing and that we are creating an environment where not just young people, but people see this as a trade that they want to access, so we have that sustainable supply chain and capacity moving forward. I think the other challenge is around customer education, around usage of this technology. So ground and air source heat pumps are a primary example of that actually, if used effectively, the benefits to customers is phenomenal. But if you revert to kind of a known use of a gas boiler, for example, you're not gonna reap the benefits of an air source or ground source heat pump. So it's how we continually support our customers to maximise the benefit available to them through this new technology.
Lovely. Thanks, Catherine. Both you and Mark have sort of talked there about the skills gap. So I think there's a massive opportunity there for a lot of people, isn't it? And exciting careers, it's in that technology. That's great. Catherine mentioned Fit for Life there. So talking about homes, Mark, can you tell us how better investment planning can support every stage of a property's life cycle?
Our challenge with existing homes is we've got to retrospectively improve them, and I think if you look at where certainly the new standards are going for new homes, etc., with the future home standard coming in later this year, which is looking at sort of the better thermal performance, reducing heat loss, reducing emissions, better ventilation, etc. I think having an eye on those sorts of things, along with sort of higher quality components that last longer. I always remember simple things around the standards that clients, so like Stonewater, would have its own sort of standard of, with component renewals, what sort of quality would be put in to ensure that it lasts and it's got more longevity. So simple things like metal runners on kitchen drawers, for example. So sort of investing in sort of higher quality stuff so that sort of lasts longer. I think also in terms of Fit for Life, we need to, the lessons from COVID, in terms of how people were obviously having to use their homes in a different way, rather than just living there. Flexible working now is very commonplace, working from home, etc. But a lot of our homes didn't have that space for people to be able to do that. They didn't have the technology to support that. People didn't necessarily have the areas, reporting during COVID, going for a half-hour walk or something like that, or just being outside. Those sorts of things are very much coming into the standards of new homes, but some of that we need to be reflecting in the sort of investment decisions we make. Also, I think obviously the Decent Home Standard, whilst it was called Decent Homes, was very much a minimal standard. That was the catalyst for investment and the catalyst for getting the affordable housing sort of stock up to a better standard. However, as I said, it was a minimum standard, and I think, as we'll talk about a bit later about what may be coming down the line with the revisions to that, that will start to really focus on some of those more fit for life aspects than probably the old standard did. So I think having a bit of a future proofing approach, obviously, looking at things like legislation changes, the drive to net zero carbon, getting properties to sort of an energy performance certificate, EPC level C by 2030, etc., halving the number of non-decent homes across the country by 2030 as well. I think they're all those sort of initiatives that will help to create homes that are fit for life. But as we said earlier, it's not all about the sort of bricks and sticks and components and kitchens and bathrooms. There's a lot more that needs to be considered around the sort of more social and resident needs, rather than necessarily saying, well, it needs a new kitchen, new bathroom. So I think they're all sort of important things to bear in mind in terms of that investment planning.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Catherine, would you like to sort of come in there and sort of talk about our approach to how our homes are being adapted to reflect changing needs like hybrid working and multi-generational
living?
Yes,
I think
you.
is where we'll go with that. Yes. Within our development pipeline, we're really committed within Stonewater to looking at what the homes of the future need to look like for our customers. So as Mark's just referenced, that accounts for the ability to work from home if that suits our customer base, which as a hybrid organisation we assume it will. And within Stonewater, we're relatively unique in the fact that probably about 50% of our customer base are self-payers. So we work on the assumption that we have a customer base that does need to support their rental payments, service charge payments, etc., via their own employment. So we need to, obviously, by virtue of that, provide a space where customers can accommodate the new hybrid working that we all kind of live with now. I think the other piece around this is around, and we'll come on to this slightly later, I think, Paula, but around building thriving communities as well. And with that comes the need for the children that live within our Stonewater communities to have a safe space to do their homework, to read. These spaces that we're trying to develop within our new build developments are there to accommodate not only our working customers and those that aspire to gain employment on a longer term basis, but also to ensure that the younger people within our communities have that space to learn, to thrive, and to aspire to achieve what they want to as they grow up as within a Stonewater home. I think coming back to Mark's point around understanding our properties, the thing I'm most proud of that we've achieved over the last couple of years is our damp mould and condensation strategy. And I know we've touched upon it a couple of times now, but that was very much premised on not only looking at our property archetype information, our household composition information, but also looking at the changing use of Stonewater properties over the past 5 years. COVID brought a completely different use to homes for everybody, not just those in social housing, for everybody. Suddenly we're all at home. Suddenly, many of us had more children, more washing machine runs, the dishwasher was on more, whatever that was. And that changed the use of properties and homes. And we're continually looking at our DMC strategy to understand how that influences usage of our properties to make sure that we can support customers, whether that be through advice or through new technology, to make sure that their homes remain a safe, secure place that is affordable for them, and that if there is a risk that DMC or additional repairs or whatever that might look like may be occurring in their home, that we're working with them proactively to address that. As Nick said, we need to be predictive, we need to be proactive and move away from reactive interventions with our customers.
Great, thanks, Catherine. It's really interesting to hear you talk there about how those changes have come about and what we're doing about it. Nick, can you tell us a bit more about sustainability at Stonewater?
We pride ourselves at Stonewater about being a leader in sustainability, and we see sustainability as one of the core things that we want to achieve. So during the pandemic, we actually sponsored the All Hands to the Pump. It was a bit of research work that was done by a think tank about the use of air source heat pumps. And we've been a leader in the sector about the use of alternative technologies. I'm particularly proud that in 2022 we took the decision that all new homes would be fossil-free heating. So all of our new homes that we've been building since then on a land and build, not necessarily, sadly, Section 106, have all had non-gas boiler or fossil fuel heating. So I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of how we now look at the business about making us sustainable. So coming back to retrofit, I'm really proud of how much money we've got from the government for our decarbonisation. We've got, in the last round, we got over £20 million of government grant. We take a fabric first approach. So we don't want to have all bells and whistles technology, because from a thermal efficiency point of view, actually, it is actually quite simple. It's about good quality insulation, good quality windows, and an efficient form of heating. So Mark talked earlier about using drones to see the thermal efficiency of homes. And quite often, if you see these pictures, you see all the energy leaking through windows, chimneys, walls. If we do the fabric first and we actually wrap those homes round to make sure that we retain that heat, then you're not heating the environment, you're heating your home. So we're making that investment. That's our first approach, is what can we do to make those homes as thermally efficient as possible. And if they're thermally efficient, then people are spending less of their scarce money on heating. But from an environmental point of view, we're using less energy to heat the home. So that's got to be good from a CO2 perspective. So we've set up Green Oaks Centre of Excellence, and that's to provide us with a guide of what we can do, but also the sector, because we see what we do is being sector-led. We're a leader in the sector, and if there's more things we can do for sustainability, then the Green Oaks Centre of Excellence is there to facilitate that. We've also recently worked with the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust on Eden Croft. And this is an interesting example of where we've actually provided some land and provided trees. We provided other nature. So that's actually to improve biodiversity. It's also to improve the ability for local residents to have somewhere green and beautiful to go and sit, walk through with their dogs, walk through with their children, and just get out into the countryside. Because there's lots of research that shows that people are happier if they can see trees and green spaces. But we're not just relying on that. We're looking to see how we can improve across the piece. Anything we can do to reduce our carbon footprint has got to be good. Got to help global warming. But we're providing trees, 5 trees for every new home we build. We've provided over 40,000 trees in the last few years, off-site, but on-site on all of our new developments, we provide 1 tree. And we've taken the view that that tree isn't going to be a monoculture, flowering cherry tree. We want that flowering cherry tree to produce cherries or apples or pears, so that people can actually use that. If they want to go and pick the fruit and make a crumble or whatever in the autumn, they can do. And rather than planting berberis as a defensive area, let's plant gooseberry bushes, because gooseberries are as vicious as berberis in my experience. And then you can actually pick the gooseberries and use them for food. And if you don't want to pick the gooseberries, then from my experience in my garden, the birds will soon have them anyway. So you're actually helping in the nature by providing a food source. So our commitment to environmental sustainability is very deep, and it's one of our core values, I would say, at Stonewater.
Thanks, Nick. I've loved hearing about all those initiatives. And we've had a couple of lovely retrofit stories on our website recently, so people can go and check those out. In fact, their bills were even being cut in half, so I think they were particularly pleased. Catherine, when we were researching this episode, you were very passionate about homes being foundations for communities. So how are our investments contributing to well-being and long-term affordability?
I am extremely passionate about this, probably more so than I should be, but I genuinely believe wholeheartedly that if we can provide good, affordable, safe, secure homes for our customers, it gives them the foundation to achieve their aspirations. Whatever that aspiration might be, that's not for us to determine, but it gives people the foundation to at least consider what they want for them and their families and have a safe place to be able to achieve that. We obviously can't do that in isolation, and as Stonewater, realistically, we are a landlord and we can signpost people to additional services. We're not the fourth emergency service. We are here to provide a home in which people can flourish, ideally. But what we can do is navigate our network of partners to ensure that those opportunities for our customers are increased wherever possible. So Stonewater is really committed to partnership engagement, whether that be through our stakeholders, local authority partners, or through our homes and development partners, our contractors and development contractors, all of whom we work very closely with to look at how we can maximise social value for our customer base and for the wider communities in which Stonewater operates. So by way of example, with our responsive repairs contractors, for example, we work very closely to understand how we can maximise apprenticeship and employment opportunities for Stonewater customers and their children to access a different recruitment path or career path opportunities that they might not otherwise get outside of kind of being a Stonewater customer. So we really work very closely with our contractors from that perspective. And this really is about driving aspiration for our customers, but also influencing local infrastructure. We know within social housing, unfortunately, and I won't get into the politics of this, but many of our customers do face disproportionate health inequalities and educational inequalities that are just via virtue of the fact that they live in social housing and the communities that they live in. The really important thing is that we're bringing together all of our partners, and Stonewater is such a big influential social housing provider within the sector, to lead that discussion around the fact that we should be aspiring to create communities where people thrive, don't just survive, and that they can go on to have flourishing futures and build their families environments that they're proud to live within. So yes, sorry, I am passionate about this. And I could talk to you about this for the next 4 hours, but we've all got things to do. But yeah, so it's very much a partnership approach, and Stonewater can't do it in isolation. But also links back to Nick's point around our position as a thought leader, not only in terms of environmental sustainability, but also how we leverage the support of the large organisations that we work with to make a difference within our communities.
Yeah, again, there are some lovely initiatives, and I see them when they come through on our LinkedIn posts. I was speaking to a colleague yesterday, and she said one of their retrofit partners is about to make a substantial donation to one of their local schools and pop some artwork in, and they just help out in retirement living schemes, don't they, and make donations of food so they can have events throughout the year and stuff. So
and those are wonderful initiatives, but the larger scale things are around access to learning academies, to producing career paths for people that ordinarily might not have that opportunity, and that's where we'll see the long term impact of our partnership working potentially.
Like you say, we could go on all day about this, but let's get back to our questions. So Mark, my next question is for you, and what you expect to see around the revised Decent Home Standard and how providers should prepare.
As I mentioned earlier, the Decent Homes guidance hasn't actually been updated since 2006. So we having its 20th birthday next year. Hopefully we will have some changes to it in advance of its birthday. It's, as I said earlier, it has always been a minimal standard. It was to be a catalyst for investment, etc. I think, obviously, given the age of the current guidance, etc., we were talking about technology earlier, etc. So it's pretty outdated as far as some of that sort of stuff is concerned. The standard itself, without going into too much detail, is split into 4 parts. So very briefly, in terms of the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, or HHSRS as we refer to it, in terms of Criterion A, we're obviously expecting that to also incorporate, it does incorporate damp and mould at the moment, has done for several years, but obviously with AWAB's law and the focus rightly on condensation, damp and mould, etc., changes and inclusion of some of that, along with other compliance-related areas, so fire safety, etc. This is all personal view, by the way. So the standard has been through a sounding board and a degree of consultation with both resident representatives and also registered providers, etc. It's also been extended as well in terms of providers. It's not not just the affordable housing sector now. Under the Rent Rights Act as well, it also cover private landlords as well. So the standard will be applied as it is, and as it will be updated to private rental as well, not just affordable housing. So I think we can expect to see also changes around the current standard has references to components that are both old and in poor condition, and requirements to have both of those attributes before deeming it needing to be replaced. I think we'll see a movement, quite rightly, I think, to condition. So if something is in poor condition, but maybe it's not reached its expected life cycle, then it's obviously something that should be flagged as due for renewal. So there were a number of different ways that the standard could be used and interpreted, which might not necessarily give you an answer you think is actually sensible in a home. So, for example, you could put a new bathroom in under sort of modern facilities, but have an old kitchen, and a new bathroom would probably be a cheaper cost than a new kitchen. So there were a few sort of nonsensical types of things, which, going back to that point about it being a minimum standard. So I think we'll see some of the sort of changes to that. Thermal comfort alignment with EPC standards, although the EPC is obviously under review as well, energy performance certificates, and interpretation of modern facilities. So I think we are likely to see more around security, safety, digital technology. But also, just going back to Catherine's point about communities and external areas, I think also focus on those sorts of elements as well, not just the individual home. So just taking those things on board, and also tenant engagement as well. So again, alignment with some of the things that are coming out of the consumer standards and those related things. So I think in short, how do providers prepare? I've always had the view that if you invest in homes as the needs require, you should almost by default, decent homes should take care of itself, which is probably easier said than done, particularly when we go back to the competing resources, etc. But, if we're picking up on Nick's point around proactive investment, property, MOT type things, and giving sort of homes passports, those sorts of things, if we're doing all that sort of stuff, we should automatically take care of decent homes. I think that continued holistic investment around needs should stand you in pretty good stead for whatever changes come down the line with the decent home standard.
Lovely. Thank you. So we have covered a lot today, from smart technology and data, sustainability, community impact, and future-proofing. But before we go, I've got one last question for you. What is the one thing you think housing providers keep front of mind when they're investing in homes? Catherine, let's go to you first.
I passionately believe that the important thing is that we're not just investing in homes, we are investing in an environment that is safe, secure and affordable and warm for people to flourish. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think gone are the days within any sector, not just social housing, where we compartmentalise property and people. That's just not acceptable. This is around creating homes and environments and communities in which people can achieve what they want to achieve and achieve their aspirations. And I think secondary to that is that we cannot work in isolation. We as they say, no man is an island. This is about how we engage with our partners, local authority partners, contracting partners, development partners, etc., to really leverage the value and the scale of influence that we have collectively to address some of those inequalities that unfortunately we do still see within social housing.
Thank you, Catherine. Mark, let's sandwich you between our Stonewater guests.
I think that the obvious one for us and the whole purpose of why my team exists, why we do what we do, is around the customers, what the customers' needs are, and best serving those in terms of the environments we create. Yeah, and very much, that is the home, but it's the communities and the external areas and everything around that. So I think from a sort of technical perspective, I think it's just appreciating there is that finite resource and please, please take that step back and think about that before investment occurs, just to make sure we are spending those resources in the best way for the residents.
Okay, lovely. And last but not least, Nick.
I mean, I don't think I can add much more than what Mark and Catherine said. The only thing I would add is let's not forget about being proactive and maximising use of AI, because that is the future. And if we can actually do things more efficiently, we can do more things. So that £90 million can go further, and we can do more upgrades and more investments. So anything that allows us to do that has got to be a good thing.
Great. That's a lovely way to wrap up. Thanks, Nick. So thank you all for joining us today on the Air. We'll be back again very soon with that second of our double bill that I spoke about earlier, talking about investing in supported housing. We'll be talking about the benefits of highlighting the vital role it plays in providing refuge, rehabilitation, greater quality of life, as well as the broader societal benefits. So please do watch or subscribe, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks to my guests, Catherine, Nick and Mark, and everyone for listening.
We hope you enjoyed listening to the latest episode of On the Air. We'll be publishing a new episode again soon. To stay up to date, subscribe to our channel. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to share your thoughts with us on LinkedIn by typing #SW on the Air.